Are going to have ourselves a wild weekend on Sunday in Daytona because for the first time, at least that I know of, the NASCAR Cup Series is running the Daytona Road Course or the Roval, whatever you want to call it. They are running it this weekend. The reason they are doing this is because New York's quarantine laws do not allow you to enter the state if you're from another state without a 2-week quarantine. So they had to ditch Watkins Glen, which stinks because Watkins Glen is super fun. But instead, they are replacing it with another road course, this one down in Daytona. And the first time that these drivers run a lap on this track in these cars is going to be under green flag conditions. There are no practices this weekend. There is no qualifying. It's going to be wild. So we're probably going to see some crashes. We're probably going to see some drivers being aggressive, but also drivers playing things carefully. And I am excited to see how things go down. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to break down the Go Bowling 235. I said 325. I've written it out in my notes like 15 different times. It is a 235. I don't know why I'm having so much trouble with that, but I am. Regardless, 235 miles this weekend in Daytona for the first ever time. And it's also the first time they have set the field by a new method. It is a formula that requires past finishing position in the most recent race, owner points, fastest lap in the most recent race. So it's a new method, but it also means we know who is starting where. So from a DFS perspective, this thing is a dream, and it also gives us drivers who fit our process for DFS. We'll talk about that in a bit, but lock is at 3 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, and you can fill out lineups from now until then. Before we take a look at the track breakdown, for years, numberFire Premium has been provided our users with expert analysis, survivor pool tools, and most importantly, the fantasy football draft kit, all for up to $49.99 a month. Now, as a way of saying thank you to our community for years of support, numberFire is rolling out a new premium package for just $9.99 a month that will provide you with all the sports betting and daily fantasy tools you need year-round. And the best part is that expert analysis, those survivor tools, and yes, even the draft kit are now free. Head to numberFire.com to check out the new and improved site and take advantage of the new premium package. Let's take a look at the track breakdown here for the Daytona Road Course. And obviously, there is no history to look at this track to decide how to play things. But we also don't need the history because roster construction here is pretty obvious. If you are a veteran NASCAR DFS player, you probably know how you want to set your rosters. We've mentioned before that in shorter races, we want to target drivers starting further back. There is less upside for drivers at the front to get upside via laps led, and meanwhile, those in the back have the same upside as always. So in short races, you want to gun for place differential. This happens to be the shortest race of the season by a whopping 44 laps. Even the road courses are 44 laps longer than this one. Only 65 total laps in the race, which means we have 6.5 FanDuel points available for laps led. So we can look at this mathematically to show the lack of upside for drivers at the front. Let's say Kevin Harvick, who is starting on the pole, leads every single lap and wins this race. If he does that, he will score 56 FanDuel points. That would be in the perfect lineup because scoring overall will be low on Sunday. But you have no room for error there. The drivers starting further back do have room for error, and they have upside as well. So, like if we were to, let's say we cut Harvick down to 30 laps led in a win from the first starting spot. Ryan Blaney could outscore him while finishing fourth, or he could equal him while finishing fourth with 0 laps led because he's starting 24th. Alex Bowman could tie Harvick with a 5th place finish. So there's just not a lot of wiggle room for drivers at the front, whereas there is wiggle room for drivers starting further back. So we're going to want to target drivers who we think will finish better than where they're starting. And thankfully, again, we have some ideal candidates for that this weekend with the new formula. Owner points, most recent finish, fastest lap. So drivers who finish poorly in Michigan or are low in owner points will be starting further back. And that gives us some legitimate choices deeper in the pack. And we'll talk about them in the tier-by-tier breakdown. So we don't even have to force it here. We're not, trying to dig for bad drivers in the place differential. We can play things pretty straight up and just target drivers who we think will net us some place differential. There are two big caveats with this, though. The first one is that while hunting for place differential, we're probably going to wind up leaving salary on the table, especially in cash games for this weekend. Ryan Blaney and Brad Keselowski are the only drivers with salaries above $10,000 who are starting lower than 7th. That is unreal. So you're going to leave salary on the table this weekend, and potentially it will be a lot of it. I would just mentally prepare yourself for that right now, that you're going to leave a good amount of salary on the table. The other thing is that you can still use a driver starting near the front if you think they can win. As mentioned in the Harvick example, drivers can pay off at the front. The 43 points for a win are huge, and there is a good chance that the driver who gets those 43 points will be in the perfect lineup. So this is a situation where we want to play the assumption game. If you're a new listener to the podcast, this is the assumption game. It's where in a tournament lineup, don't do this in cash games, but in a tournament lineup, you pick a driver you think will win the race. You plug that driver into your lineup regardless of where they are starting. Then you go with place differential after that. It is hard to use two drivers starting to the front because only one of them in reality will get the 43 points for a win. So you pick an assumed winner and then look for place differential after that. In cash games, again, you don't want to play the assumption game there. You are just looking for place differential at all 5 spots, even if you leave salary on the table, which I think you will based on my initial look for this weekend. But for tournaments, you can use someone at the front under the assumption that they win the race. So a little bit of leeway there. So those are the two caveats: are you'll leave salary on the table, and you can use drivers at the front if you think they can win in your tournament lineup. So pretty easy roster construction for this week. Just look for place differential above all else outside of when you're making assumptions. From a data perspective, I would look at overall road course history. I wouldn't care which drivers have driven the road course here in other series because it's a very small number. Like, it's basically Jimmy Johnson who has driven it. I think Kyle Busch may have as well, but I think that you want to look at just overall road course history versus guys who have been to this configuration before. I also would not factor in what drivers have done on the drafting tracks. The speeds on this track will be high when they're on the banking because they're on regular banking for a good chunk of the time, and they're using 750 horsepower engines instead of 550. But the key here to looking at drafting numbers is that it's the draft. I'm guessing we'll see drafting, but it'll be so much more than that with all the twists and turns. So to me, it's overall current form recently and overall form on road courses. I would not factor in Daytona and Talladega, despite the fact there will be some drafting, I'd assume, on the banking this weekend. I wouldn't factor that in too much from a process perspective. So that's roster construction and strategies. Let's dive into the tier-by-tier breakdown for this weekend, starting with the elite tier on FanDuel. That is Martin Truex Jr. at $14,000 through Denny Hamlin at $12,000. And all 4 of the drivers in this tier are starting at the front. So we can rank them straight up in terms of how often we'll use them as assumed winners. Because this is a road course, I think you have to put Truex and Chase Elliott at the top, and I prefer Truex by a smidge. Truex has legitimately had a chance to win 7 of the past 8 road course races. He did win 3 of those, so he can convert, and he was runner-up in 2 others. In one of the others where he wasn't in the top 2, he was leading in the final lap, leading in the final turn, but he got wrecked by Jimmy Johnson as Johnson tried to make an aggressive move to get the win. Didn't work, took out himself and Truex, so no win there. In another at Sonoma, Truex actually did win the opening stage, but his car, I think, legitimately caught fire. It had electrical issues under caution, so didn't win that one. So he could have won, get away, 7 of the past 8 road course races. Chase Elliott has been awesome. He also has 3 wins in this time, but I'm going to go Truex by a hair. Truex, at least in my eyes, has the better current form. Elliott has better current form in my model, in the current form only section of my model, but I prefer Truex's form, so I'll go Truex 1 over Chase. The advantage Chase does have is that he starts a bit deeper in the field. He's 7th, while Truex is 3rd, but a little bit of place differential juice there. But from an assumed winner perspective, give me Truex as my number 1 guy in this field. The other 2 in this tier have been the guys who have dominated this year. Those are Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin. Current form does matter at these tracks too, so I do like them for sure. Harvick has been more consistent on the road courses recently, but neither has had the biggest upside. So to me in this tier, I think it's Truex 1, Chase Elliott 2, then it's a tier down to Harvick, and then Hamlin is 4th in this tier. But none of these guys are cash game considerations, despite how good Truex and Elliott are. I want to gun for the place differential guys in cash games versus the studs. The second tier on FanDuel is Ryan Blaney at $11,400 through Clint Boyer at $10,000. And this tier actually does have a couple of guys starting further back. Blaney is 24th. Brad Keselowski is 17th. And I think they are the top 2 plays on this slate. Blaney specifically is number 1 for me. I know that all of you listening, the regular listeners, will be shocked to hear that I like Ryan Blaney, but hey, I do. Blaney, looking at him on road courses, in the past 2 years, Truex and Elliott have won all but one road course race. Blaney won the other. He won that one when Truex got taken out by Johnson, won in Charlotte. He was running 3rd, so it's not as if he totally fluked into that win. He was running 3rd on the final lap. He got the win there. Blaney also has 2 other top 5s in that time. And I think what's important is that Blaney has 1 top 5 on all 3 road courses in the past 2 years. It's not specific to one venue. Some guys run better at some tracks than others, like Kevin Harvick tends to be really good in Sonoma, not as good in Watkins Glen, whereas Chase Elliott just destroys worlds in Watkins Glen. So you do see some skewing there based on the track. But with Blaney specifically, he's at a top 5 at all 3 road courses. He is starting back in 24th. I think that because of that, Blaney is the first guy you lock into your cash game rosters for this race, and he will likely be the player to whom I have the most exposure in tournaments as well. Keselowski starting a bit deeper, which is why he's a tiny bit less of a priority. He's also not as good of a road racer as Blaney. He has just 1 top 5 and 2 top 10s the past 2 years, but I still think that Keselowski is in consideration for cash games. He's just not as big of a lock as Blaney is. Clint Boyer in this tier starting 12th, which is not super deep, but it is deep enough to have some place differential juice. He has the 4th best average finish on road courses the past 2 years. He had 3 top 5s in that time, so you can go there. I would not use Boyer in cash personally, but he does work for tournaments, and someone I'll definitely go to, but not as often as Blaney and Keselowski. Among the assumed winners in this tier, I'd go Kyle Busch over Joey Logano. Busch has been pretty rough recently, obviously, but he has a better history on road courses than Logano. Performance has been a little bit better recently. So this tier to me is Blaney 1, Keselowski 2, Busch 3, Boyer 4, and then Logano 5 for the second tier. The mid-range on FanDuel is Kurt Busch at $9,800 through Jimmy Johnson at $8,800. And there are 2 cash game considerations in this tier. Those are Eric Jones and Alex Bowman. Both those guys are starting in the 20s. Jones is 20th, Bowman is 27th, and both have at least some success on road courses. Jones has 4 top 10s on road courses the past 2 seasons. 2 of those were top 5s. Bowman also has a pair of top 5s, including a runner-up last year in Charlotte. He was 4th in the inaugural Charlotte race, so he can adjust well to a new track. And I think the reason for that for Bowman, this is anecdotal, but he does a lot of work in simulators. That was literally his job with Hendrick back in the day. So I would expect Bowman to be prepared for this track despite having never raced it, because you can race it in a simulator. So I think that Bowman will be prepared from that perspective. So I think that that's why Bowman is a really good play. The one concern with Jones specifically is points. He could prioritize stage points over finishing points because he's on the outside looking in for the playoffs. We don't get points for stage points on FanDuel. They also could, on the flip side, could prioritize a win because that would lock them into the playoffs, and Jones is good enough to do that. So that is something to at least consider with Jones, is that maybe he guns for stage points over the win. But even with that, I think that he is awesome for both cash games and for tournaments. Bowman is a bigger priority because he's locked in the playoffs. He's starting deeper in the field. So Bowman, the better option than Jones, but both cash game considerations for me. Other guys here are all starting 13th or higher, so they're not on the cash game radar. I think that Matt DiBenedetto has the potential to win this race. He was awesome on road courses last year. Jimmy Johnson and William Byron are starting just outside the top 10 and have recent road course success. So I'll rank this tier Bowman 1, Jones 2, and then a full tier gap to the rest. DiBenedetto will be 3rd for me, followed by Johnson, Byron, and Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch is also good on road courses, but he's starting 2nd highest in this group behind Eric Almirola. I will have 0 shares of Almirola this week. He's starting 6th, not that good on road courses, so I'm okay avoiding him for this weekend. The value tier is Christopher Bell at $8,400 through Michael McDowell at $6,500. And there are a couple of guys here starting deeper in the pack. The ones who are starting outside the top 20 are Cole Custer, Chris Buescher, and McDowell. And McDowell is easy to love at $6,500. He is starting 30th, which is the deepest guy we have discussed so far, but he is awesome on road courses. He actually used to teach drivers how to drive this track type. I think he even taught William Byron how to drive on these tracks. So clearly he knows a thing or two about getting around these places. His equipment has been better this year. You won't need the salary savings on McDowell at $6,500, but he is the top play in this tier. And I think that between Bowman at $9,100 and McDowell at $65, there is no one else I would rather have in my lineup straight up than Michael McDowell because he is starting 30th. So even if you do leave salary on the table, McDowell is someone I would get in there in cash games and try to use a lot in tournaments as well. I'd put Buescher second on this list. He is starting 21st, but he's another solid road course racer. He had a top 17 average running position in all 3 races last year. So Buescher on the map for me as well. Cole Custer is 26th. He's interesting. He was consistent on road courses in the Xfinity Series, but he never really lit it up. So I'd rank him below Buescher and below McDowell, but ahead of a lot of other guys in this tier. My favorite among the non-back dwellers is Christopher Bell because he was really good on these tracks in the Xfinity Series. He was not Austin Cindric good. He's not in this field, but he wasn't as good as Austin Cindric, but he was awesome. He had a win, 2 runner-ups in the past 2 years in the Xfinity Series. Bell is starting 15th, so not a cash game play, but I'll roll the dice on him in tournaments at times at $8,400. I think he's worth it there for sure, despite starting 15th. So for me, this tier is McDowell 1, Buescher 2, Custer 3, Bell 4, Ryan Newman 5, and then Tyler Reddick is 6. I think there are a couple other guys in this tier, but as far as the guys I'm really willing to consider, that's the way that I would rank them. The punting tier is Austin Dillon at $6,300 on down. You do have Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in this tier, starting deeper in the pack. I'm noting that because he's starting deeper. I am not noting that because I want to use him. He is terrible on tracks that involve a lot of skill, and road courses do count as being that. He ranks 25th in my model, so despite starting 25th, I don't see a lot of place differential juice there. So it's a tough sell. I might have some obligatory shares because he is starting so deep, but I really don't want to. I will say that. John Hunter Nemechek is starting 28th. I'll get some of that. He's teammates with McDowell, so maybe we can get some lessons passed down here before the weekend. Nemechek was just okay here in the Xfinity Series, but, starting 28th is really good. Daniel Suarez is starting 31st. He ran well on the road courses and better equipment. He might be able to pull off a good run here. I don't think I've had a single share of Daniel Suarez yet this entire year, and it's been justifiable because his running positions are generally 25th or worse, but 31st, good road course history. I might use him this week. Not a priority, but, I could consider it at least. I'd put Nemechek over it because the equipment is so much better, and they're starting in a similar spot, but I would consider Suarez. Not sure if I'll actually wind up using him or not for this weekend. Let's do the picks to win. As always, one above $10,000 and one below it. The one above, to me, I'm going to go Truex just because I think I always pick Truex on the road courses. I know Elliott has been very good too, but Truex, slightly longer win odds at FanDuel Sportsbook. I think that with Elliott being the favorite, I'll go not quite the full chalk and go Truex. It's cheating, but whatever, who cares? He's close enough. So Truex is my pick to win at the top end. Among the guys below $9,000, it is between Eric Jones and Alex Bowman. I am going to go Eric Jones. I have concerns about picking him to win just because of the potential for him to prioritize stage points over the win, but he's a good driver. He has had good finishes on this track type in the past, and he needs a win if he wants to make the playoffs. So give me Truex and Jones, a current Joe Gibbs Racing stack. Next year, not so much, but a Joe Gibbs Racing stack in the win picks for this week. That is all that we have for this NASCAR podcast, but it should be a really fun race on Sunday. I'm looking forward to seeing it because it could be absolutely wild. I think drivers will probably be pretty conservative, play things safe early on to get a feel for the track, but they're going to light it up eventually, and it's going to be a fun race. So looking forward to tuning in, hopefully a good one for DFS as well. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald. He is our video producer from the video side of things here today as we were live on YouTube. Thank you, Cal, as always. Make sure you check out all the good stuff on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. We have, of course, NASCAR. We have UFC with Austin Swaim. I'm doing an MLB solo shot podcast every morning to break down that day's main MLB DFS slate. Tom Vecchia is doing NBA and NHL. Brandon Gadula and I are doing PGA. So 6 different sports all at the same time over on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. If you have any questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Good luck with your lineups for this weekend. We'll talk to you again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.